Glass caught the city like a net of light, and inside that net a single gold pen flashed like bait. The restaurant hovered above Tokyo, all windows and hush. Traffic glowed below. Waiters moved like clock hands. At table 19, the room leaned toward a scene it did not want to witness. Richard Halden sat with the ease of someone used to owning the view. Silver hair, controlled smile, a suit that made no sound. He lifted the menu the way a judge lifts a file, brief and final. Across from him, an empty chair waited. Nia Clark stood at his elbow, posture straight, apron neat, name tag clean as a verdict. She knew the map of the room, where the air cooled, where voices bounced, where eyes went when money entered. She knew the weight of attention. She also knew Japanese like a second heartbeat. He looked at her the way a man tests a lock. "Water," he said, not looking up. She poured. The water moved in the glass like a private storm. Halden's phone hummed, then stilled. He placed the menu down like a bet and drew a pen from his pocket. It caught the ceiling lights and threw them back cold. "Miss Clark," he said, reading her tag. His voice was even. "I have an offer." He set the pen near the bread plate like setting a key between strangers. The pen was gold and heavy, a bar of somebody's past and future. "Serve me tonight, only in Japanese, and I'll pay you $1 million. He said it the way doctors say a dosage, precise, clinical. Already entered in a chart. Sound thinned. Forks paused. The skyline hung like a diagram of choices. Nia watched the pen as if it were a tiny sun asking her to orbit. She had stood in rooms with men who pushed rules to hear where the alarm lived. This was different. Not a dare. A purchase order. Language, as he framed it, was a leash. She took in the details that mattered. A ring on his right hand. Not wedding, but corporate, engraved with his first company's emblem. A cufflink shaped like a gear. A napkin folded like a white flag he would never raise. Nia's first training spoke. Keep the face calm, keep the service even. But the other training, older, quieter, rose from years of study from a teacher who once said, "Every word is a bridge, never a chain." "Sir," she began and stopped. The word felt like a door swung the wrong way. Halden inched the pen closer. Faint metallic whisper. "I prefer quick decisions." The city outside pulsed in patterns. Inside, something crooked tried to take shape. A manager at the host stand watched with the smile people wear when they hope power will stay polite. Nia lifted the menu. Japanese characters ran down the page like a river she knew by sound and depth. She looked at the pen, the empty chair, glass wall that made the world look collectible. She set the menu down. She folded her hands. She did not move and she did not speak. She let the room feel the shape of what he had said. Silence arrived like weather. It filled the glass, the silver, the city night. It named the offer without repeating it. It turned the pen into what it was. A test dressed as a gift. Halden leaned back, waiting for language to kneel. Nia kept her eyes level. She let time pass until the emptiness of his sentence showed itself. Nia's silence became the first act of resistance. The menu looked harmless, but it ruled the room. From the glass wall to the quiet kitchen doors, every person here moved to its grammar. Prices stood like small thrones. Descriptions whispered rank. Even the paper had weight, thick enough to signal who belonged and who served. On this stage, wealth wore manners like a clean glove. Nia Clark held the menu with steady hands. She knew the kanji by heart. She had learned them in warm classrooms and on long trains, tracing strokes in a notebook that smelled of ink and rain. She had learned them out of love, not fear. Words to her were bridges. Tonight, someone wanted to turn them into a leash. Around her, the restaurant gave off its calm heat. A line of candles, the hush of deep carpets, the soft chime of polished glass. The air carried citrus from a fresh peel, and the faint iron of the city beyond the windows. Everything promised order. Under the promise, something sharper watched. Waiters moved past like quiet currents. Their faces were smooth, their steps exact. But their whispers had an edge. "It's a test night," one breathed near the service station. "Table 19 started it," another answered. "VIP rules. They pay to play. They like to see who breaks." The words slid under the polished noise: challenge, game, amusement. The staff knew the script. A guest throws power across a table. A worker is supposed to catch it with a smile. The manager stood at the host stand, head tilted, eyes bright in a way that meant calculation. He was polite to all, loyal to the room first. Cameras were set into the ceiling, for safety, he always said. Their dark circles tracked the flow of plates and the small jolts of human pride. Naya studied the menu as if it were a map of hidden roads. The sections themselves told a story. Chefs tasting for those who trusted the house. Seasonal imports for those who wanted to be seen with rare things. Omakase for those who gave control and pretended that was freedom. Language did social work here. It wrapped money in ritual and called it taste. At table 19, Richard Halden waited behind the stillness of a man used to signing ends of stories. His gold pen lay near the bread plate like a trophy from another hunt. He had given an order dressed as an offer. He wanted a show that looked like grace but felt like ownership. Nia turned one page. The Japanese names of fish lined up clean and clear. She could hear her teacher say them, gentle and exact. The memory steadied her. She tasted the sounds in her mouth, Suzuki, Buri, Tai. None of them were coins. None of them were chains. A junior server brushed past and murmured, "Careful. They make people sing songs, pour with the wrong hand, speak like cartoons. They call it fun. It's not." He kept moving, carrying a tray that did not shake. Nia looked at the room with the narrator's eye she had learned to carry. Power hid behind glass and linen. It smiled to avoid showing teeth. It asked for service when it meant submission. It dressed control in soft lighting and seasonal herbs. The trick worked if no one named it. She felt the menu grow heavier. Not the paper, the meaning. This little book did more than list food. It sorted lives. On one side, choice. On the other, tasks. Between them, language drew the line. Across the floor, laughter rose like steam and faded. A couple clinked crystal. A table argued about wine in careful tones. Far below, the city roared without manners. Here, the room's quiet pretended to be kindness. Nia understood the contrast. Silence can care for people. It can also hide a blow. She set the menu down. The gold pen caught the light and threw it at her hands. She did not flinch. She breathed. She listened to the small talk, the orders, the wheels of a cart, the thin scratch of a pen in a guest's fingers behind her. The restaurant's machine kept turning. Somewhere in the kitchen, a bell rang once. She could refuse now. She could end his game and step away, but refusal would leave the trick unmarked. He would try it again with someone else, somewhere else with the same clean smile. Nia lifted the menu once more, tracing the kanji with her eyes until they felt like anchors. She would not give him the show he wanted. She would give him a mirror. She decides not to refuse immediately. She wants to understand why he made the offer. Money had taught Richard Halden that every human voice could be priced. He built his empire on that lesson. In his early years, his company had promised to connect the world through communication. In truth, it had turned translation into cheap labor. Thousands of unseen workers across Asia and Africa, converting languages for cents per line. Their words fueled his machines, but their names vanished from every report. He called it scaling empathy. His board called it genius. Halden learned early that language was not about meaning. It was about ownership. Whoever owned the system decided which words survived. He turned that idea into software, then into stock, then into power. His company swallowed competitors the way fire eats air. In interviews, he smiled with restraint. "We make understanding profitable," he would say, the way a surgeon might describe removing something unnecessary. By the time he arrived in Tokyo, he had mastered the art of calm cruelty. His gestures were minimal, his voice almost kind, but behind the stillness lived a collector's hunger, the need to prove that even dignity could be folded into a contract. That night, when he offered Nia Clark $1 million to serve him in Japanese, he was not searching for pleasure. He was staging control. It was another experiment in human response. How far could money bend meaning before it broke? He had tried versions of this before. A journalist paid to withhold a story, a translator hired to rewrite his interviews until his arrogance sounded like vision, a foundation that donated millions to education, on the condition that its schools used his company's software. Each act bought quiet. Each receipt recorded victory. The habit had become instinct. Silence, to Halden, was proof that the world still worked in his favor. In his private files was a folder titled Disruptive language events. Inside were reports from his behavioral team. They tracked the emotional reactions of employees, critics, and service workers. He read those reports like others read novels. They reassured him that people could be charted, that resistance was only data waiting for correction. But something had begun to crack. His company's profits rose, yet so did the noise around him. Lawsuits, testimonies, translations that refused to hide what had been done. Words once obedient were rebelling. That was why he traveled alone now, seeking quieter places, safer rituals. He liked high rooms, fine glass, obedient light. He liked Tokyo because the service was perfect. The illusion of harmony that covered all tension. A city that could bow without breaking. He admired that. When he saw Nia Clark, he recognized precision. Her posture, her silence, her flawless Japanese. She reminded him of his best translators, those invisible people who turned chaos into order. She represented the very thing he thought he owned, disciplined language. So he performed the experiment again. He offered the pen, the money, the test, not to insult but to measure. He wanted to see if the world still folded under wealth as neatly as before. He told himself it was curiosity, not arrogance. But curiosity without conscience is only another form of hunger. The restaurant's glass walls reflected his face from every angle. Multiplied, perfect, untouchable. Outside, the city burned in silent neon. Inside, his question still hovered between them like smoke that would not rise. He waited for her answer, confident it would come. It always did. The narrator's tone shifted, precise as a diagnosis. He had spent his life buying silence. Tonight, he would meet someone who knew its cost. The girl who stood before the billionaire had once washed dishes behind a diner that smelled of rain and grease. In Atlanta, Nia Clark learned early that silence could protect or destroy. Her mother worked double shifts at a hospital and came home too tired for words. Her father, when he was still around, said little that wasn't shaped by exhaustion. But on weekends, Nia read aloud to her younger brother, stories from borrowed library books, foreign names she mispronounced but loved. Those words built her first bridges out of smallness. By 16, she spoke fragments of French and Spanish. By 18, she had earned a scholarship to study linguistics, a language for every dream she refused to lose. When a visiting professor from Tokyo introduced her to Japanese, she heard a music that was exact and kind at once, the sound of respect, the rhythm of balance. Years later, in a narrow classroom near Shinjuku Station, she sat under buzzing lights as her teacher, Professor Takamori, wrote on the board, Yansie, Kotoba, words. Then he drew another, Yanling, Kotodama, the spirit within them. He said softly, every word you learn is a bridge. Don't let anyone make it a leash. That sentence never left her. When rent climbed and her scholarship barely covered tuition, Nia took the job at the rooftop restaurant. She told herself it was temporary, a way to study people's tones, gestures, and masks. Language didn't live only in books. It lived in how the powerful ordered wine and how the quiet apologized for existing. Each table was a case study. Each guest, a translation of their own pride. So when Richard Halden appeared with his gold pen and clinical tone, she did not see only a customer. She saw a pattern, the same one that ran through centuries of trade, treaties, and power. A man mistaking ownership for communication. Now, standing in the reflection of Tokyo's glass skyline, she replayed the words he had offered. Serve me in Japanese. He thought he was choosing the language of control. He didn't understand it was the language of honor. Nia's mind moved through the shapes of the kanji on the menu. Every one of them had once been drawn by someone's hand, long before money tried to claim them. Bridge, not leash, she reminded herself. She pictured Professor Takamori's small apartment filled with dictionaries and tea steam. He had once told her, the problem is not misunderstanding. It's the people who use understanding as a weapon. That night, she felt that truth press against her ribs. At the service station, a junior waiter whispered, "Are you okay? You can tell the manager if he said something." Nia only smiled. "I'm fine." But her smile wasn't agreement. It was calculation. She looked back at Halden. The city lights carved his face into halves, one of privilege, one of emptiness. He was staring out the window as if the skyline might salute him. The gold pen still glowed beside his plate, waiting for her decision. She could refuse and walk away. That would be justice, maybe, but it would leave him untouched, still believing that silence meant victory. Her heart slowed, her mind sharpened. If he wanted performance, she would give him truth disguised as service. If he wanted a language he couldn't own, she would speak it until it exposed him. In her head, she translated her resolve into Japanese. Watashi wa eiko no tame ni tsukainai. I will not serve for his glory. She adjusted her uniform, smoothed her apron, and stepped back into the golden light of the dining room. The glass walls no longer intimidated her. They reflected both of them equally now. She decided she would serve him, but on her own terms. The table looked like peace. It was anything but. Crystal glasses, folded linen, candlelight soft as mercy. The stage was perfect. Only the air betrayed it, too still, like a courtroom waiting for the verdict. Nia Clark stood across from Richard Halden, the man who had turned speech into business and power into theater. The gold pen gleamed between them like a loaded prop. Around them, servers moved slower than usual, pretending not to watch. The manager whispered to the sommelier, "Let it play out. Don't interfere." Halden leaned back, his confidence unbent. "So you accept?" Nia's voice was calm. "Yes, sir. I will serve." But when she spoke again, her tone changed. Clear, melodic, unhurried. Japanese flowed from her mouth like a stream carved through stone. "Konbanwa. Omachi itashimashita. Good evening. Thank you for waiting." Halden's smile twitched. He didn't speak the language. His translator, called away to another floor, was nowhere near. He thought the words didn't matter. He was used to tone, not meaning. "English, please," he said lightly. Nia bowed slightly, graceful and exact. "Sumimasen," she replied. "Sorry, comes," but continued in Japanese. Each sentence carried poise, not defiance. Her movements were clean, her rhythm deliberate. She placed the chopsticks parallel, poured his wine with both hands. Eyes steady, he watched, uneasy but curious. Like a man studying a code he could not break. "Kyu wa subarashi yoru ni narimasu," she said. "Tonight will be a beautiful night." The phrase sounded like courtesy, but her tone held an edge that only those fluent could hear. Two waiters near the wall stiffened, one mouthed to the other. "She's not serving him. She's describing him." Halden leaned forward, fingers steepled. "You're fluent, impressive. How long did it take you to learn?" She met his eyes, still speaking in Japanese. "Jikan wa kakatte mo shinjitsu wo manabu hou ga muzukashi." It takes time, but truth is harder to learn. Her voice carried over the quiet restaurant. Every table fell into listening. The sound of her words drew a circle around them, a boundary he could not cross. Halden picked up his pen, turning it between his fingers. "I could hire you," he said softly. "People like you shouldn't waste their gifts waiting tables." Nia smiled, polite and distant. "Hito wo kaun no ga tokui nan desu ne," she said. "You are good at buying people." He laughed, thinking it a compliment. Others did not. The staff froze, sensing a duel invisible to him. He gestured at the menu. "Then tell me, what do you recommend?" Her hand brushed the paper. She looked at it the way one might look at an old weapon. "Yono menu wa subarashi desu," she said. "This menu is beautiful." Then she added almost under her breath, "Tada subarashi mono wa gyaku ni anshin dekinai." Beautiful things are often the most dangerous. She set the menu down like a shield. The words were too calm to sound like defiance, but something in her posture had changed. Her stillness had weight. Halden shifted in his chair. "I can't follow you," he admitted, half laughing. "Maybe you can write it down later." Nia shook her head gently. "Kaki komemasen. Sushitara ikite inai." I cannot write it down. If copied, it is no longer alive. The translator returned midway through dessert, breathless, carrying a folder. "I'm sorry, Mr. Halden, But Nia raised a hand. "It's all right," she said, this time in English. The switch was sudden, deliberate, surgical. "We're finished." Halden frowned. "Finished? You've barely served me." She bowed once, perfectly formal. "The service," she said, "has concluded." The room did not breathe. Even the candles seemed to wait. Then she stepped back. The gold pen, untouched, gleamed on the table between them. For the first time all evening, it looked small. Halden glanced at the other diners, some staring, some pretending not to. He felt the shift but couldn't name it. She had spoken a language he could not buy. The manager exhaled. A waiter whispered, "She didn't just serve him, she translated him." Outside, the city lights flared against the glass. Inside, the reflection of Nia's bowed figure stayed on the table surface. Calm. Unbroken, absolute. Nia bowed and said, "The service has concluded." The truth did not speak that night. It was recorded, hidden above the chandeliers. Tiny red lights blinked inside the restaurant's ceiling panels. "For VIP safety," the manager always said. In reality, they were silent witnesses, capturing every tilt of the glass. Every word dropped into expensive air. The footage of Table 19 began like any other night's archive. Timestamp, location, names blurred for privacy. But what followed was not routine. It was theater, stripped bare of its illusion. Richard Halden's hand resting near a gold pen. Nia Clark's steady bow. The moment power tried to purchase dignity, and failed. The system saved it all in crystal clarity. At midnight, after the restaurant closed, the cameras continued to hum. Nia clocked out, calm, collected. She left behind the pen on the counter. Its shine dim under the hallway light. A cleaner later found it and placed it in Lost and Found. By then, Nia was already walking through the cool Tokyo night. Her breath steady, her phone off, but somewhere inside the restaurant's servers, a copy of the video was already making its quiet journey outward. An assistant manager, young, curious and tired of the test nights, recognized the weight of what he'd seen. He downloaded the file and sent it to an address he'd seen once in Nia's messages. mjournal@kyotonews.jp. No subject line, no name, only the link. By dawn, the headline appeared online, "The Billionaire and the Waitress, a different kind of transaction." The video spread faster than anyone expected. At first, people thought it was staged. Then linguists stepped in. They translated Nia's Japanese phrases one by one, and the story shifted from curiosity to revelation. Kyū wa subarashi yoru ni narimasu. Tonight will be a beautiful night. Commentary. She was warning him that beauty built on control is fragile. Jikan wa kakate mo, shinjitsu o manabu hou ga muzukashii. It takes time, but truth is harder to learn. Commentary. A direct rebuke disguised as etiquette. Hito wo kaon no ga tokui na desu ne. You are good at buying people. Commentary. The mask falls. She names the act without raising her voice. Clips flooded social media. Slowed down, subtitled, analyzed frame by frame. Viewers called it the calmest revolution ever filmed. Others called it linguistic justice. A famous scholar tweeted, "She weaponized grace." Halden's representatives responded within hours. The video is misleading, they claimed. No inappropriate behavior occurred, but denial fell flat against the evidence. People saw his posture, his smirk, the way he leaned forward as if the world still belonged to him. Commentators replayed his history, the exploited translators, the manipulated press releases, the quiet settlements. The dinner scene became the perfect symbol of his empire, polished domination collapsing under its own reflection. Within 2 days, investors withdrew. His company's board demanded explanation. Partners cut ties. Hashtags trended across 3 continents. The man who had bought silence for years now drowned in sound. Meanwhile, Nia refused interviews. When reporters waited outside her small apartment, she slipped out a back door and took the subway to class. Her professor saw her and said nothing, just nodded. She nodded back. Online, a journalist wrote, "In the footage, the waitress never raises her voice. She never protests. She simply speaks a language her oppressor cannot buy." The cameras were not installed to protect her, yet they did. The menu, once a symbol of submission, appeared in the final seconds of the viral clip. Open on the table, facing the camera. Its neat Japanese print seemed to stare back at the viewer, as if reclaiming its own purpose. Not service, but meaning. Halden's PR empire cracked, then crumbled. His name, once printed beside progress, now floated beside shame. Silence had been his strongest ally. Now it was gone. The same systems he used to monitor others had exposed him. Frame by frame, truth by truth. Halden's PR empire collapsed under scrutiny. The world wanted her to speak, but Nia Clark had already said everything. Days after the video surfaced, her inbox filled with offers. News anchors called her the waitress who turned a dinner into a lesson. Agencies promised book deals, ad campaigns, scholarships. A talk show producer sent a message that ended with, "We can make you a brand." She deleted them all. Her roommate found her sitting by the window of their small Tokyo apartment. Textbooks open, earbuds in, phone face down. The noise outside, reporters, drones, curious fans, felt far away. Nia didn't hide from the world. She simply refused to perform for it. At the university, classmates treated her like a myth. Some bowed, others whispered. One asked if she was afraid of what. She said, "Of him," the student whispered. "He's powerful," Nia smiled gently. Power doesn't last when people stop pretending it's real. Meanwhile, Richard Halden vanished from the public eye. The same outlets that once printed his quotes now printed apologies. The empire that had measured everything in transactions could not measure what had undone him. A woman who answered an offer with silence and truth. For years, Halden had built a kingdom on attention. Now every headline used his name as a warning. The man who tried to buy dignity. The dinner that ended an era. Stock tickers showed his company bleeding in red lines across screens. His PR team resigned one by one. His last press statement read only, "No comment." That was irony enough. Back in her apartment, Nia studied late into the night. She traced kanji characters on notebook paper, repeating each stroke until her mind cleared. Every mark was a reminder. Words still belonged to people who used them with care. On her desk sat a small envelope, sealed and ready. Inside it lay the gold pen, the one Halden had slid across the table like a weapon disguised as generosity. She had kept it, not as a trophy, but as evidence of what people mistake for power. Now it was time to return it. She wrote his name on the front in neat block letters. No note inside, only 2 words stamped on the envelope in black ink. Paid in full. At the post office, the clerk hesitated. "Expensive item," he warned. "It isn't anymore," Nia said. When the package arrived at Halden's Tokyo suite, the concierge handed it over with a bow. He opened it alone. The gold pen glinted under the light, clean, untouched. The phrase on the envelope stared back at him like a sentence he couldn't appeal. Paid in full. He set the pen down, but his hand stayed still as if gravity had changed. For the first time, there was nothing left to buy. The narrator observed it all as a moral pattern. When power meets dignity, one withdraws, and the other remains. Journalists called it a cultural moment. Professors dissected it in ethics courses. But to Nia, it was simpler. A conversation had taken place, not in words, but in silence. And the silence had spoken louder than money, louder than outrage, louder than the billion clicks that followed. Some nights she walked past the restaurant. It had reopened under new management. Its windows cleaned, its name changed. Yet the air still carried a faint memory, like light on water, something that once broke and reflected everything around it. She paused, looked up at the glass walls and thought of the faces inside. Servers still bowing, guests still performing civility. The cycle would continue, but now the story had been told. The mask had slipped once. It could slip again. Nia took a breath, calm and steady. Tokyo lights shimmered across her face, blending with the stars above. She was not famous to herself. She was a student, a daughter, a voice that refused to be priced. Somewhere across the world, Richard Halden sat in a quiet room, the gold pen resting untouched beside a blank page. The silence between them stretched across oceans, neither cruel nor forgiving, only true. The pen, once his tool of transaction, had been mailed back, marked paid in full. At sunrise, Tokyo glowed like a page being rewritten. Months had passed since the night that changed everything. Yet the city still carried its quiet echo, a whisper about power, pride, and a waitress who refused to be priced. The restaurant had reopened under a new name. The glass walls were scrubbed clean, but no one who worked there forgot what had been seen through them. Far from that building, in a lecture hall at Waseda University, Nia Clark stood before a room filled with students, scholars, and translators. A small name tag rested over her heart. Guest speaker, Cross-Cultural Ethics in Communication. The title sounded clinical. But everyone knew this was not a lecture. It was testimony. Nia adjusted the microphone. Her posture was calm, her voice steady. Behind her, a projection displayed only one word. Yanzi, Kotoba, language. Language, she began, is a bridge. But sometimes it's also a shield. The audience leaned forward. Cameras blinked in the back row, but she ignored them. This was not a press event. It was an act of restoration. She spoke of her years studying in Japan, of how she learned that speech carries not only meaning, but intent. She described the quiet dignity of service work, how language could express respect without surrender. Then she paused. There was a night, she said, when I learned how fragile words can be, and how strong they can become. A murmur swept the room. She didn't name the billionaire. She didn't need to. The story was already legend. I was serving someone powerful, she continued. He wanted me to use my words in a way that would reduce me. He believed that money could decide the meaning of respect. Her eyes met the front row. A line of students taking notes. Brows furrowed, hearts listening. I answered him in the only language he could not own, she said softly. The truth. She described the night as an exchange of tones, not weapons. How silence became her first defense and speech, her last act of freedom. Each sentence was precise, stripped of drama yet full of gravity. The interpreter in the corner barely had to move. The message crossed languages on its own. Nia gestured to the projection behind her, now showing another word, Yanling Kotodama. In Japanese, she explained, this means the spirit that lives inside words. It's the belief that language has power, not because of volume or wealth, but because of honesty. She let that linger. Outside, morning light slid across the tall windows, touching the students' faces. The air felt newly washed. When I spoke that night, she said, I didn't plan to expose anyone. I only wanted to defend the idea that language should connect, not control. But the truth has its own path. It reaches where it's meant to go. She closed her notebook. A long silence followed. Not the kind that comes from confusion, but from respect. Then slowly the room stood. Not in applause, but in recognition. Heads bowed slightly as though honoring a shared understanding. From the stage, Nia felt no triumph. Only stillness. The kind her teacher, Professor Takamori, once described as the quiet heartbeat of justice. Later, as she walked home through the waking streets, the city hummed with normal life. Vendors setting up stalls, trains rumbling in rhythm. But everything felt sharper, cleaner, as if words themselves had been rinsed. She passed the old restaurant. The glass walls reflected the sunrise. No shadows this time, only light. Inside, new staff prepared for another day of service. They didn't know her, yet the space seemed to bow in her direction. Nia stopped for a moment, watching the reflection of the city in the glass, a place that had tested her, now mirroring her calm. She whispered to herself, not in English, not in Japanese, but in the universal rhythm of truth. There is a word in Japanese, she said quietly, as if to the morning air. Korodama, the spirit that lives inside words. When spoken with truth, it cannot be bought. She turned toward the rising sun, her steps light, her purpose steady. Some debts are settled in silence.